The Katy Freeway in Houston, Texas is one of the largest highways in the world. It sprouts 26 lanes at its widest and cost $2.8 billion to build. It was meant to fix the grueling rush hour traffic many Texans would face on Interstate 10. However, after its completion, traffic went up. Way up. Nearly a 30% increase in the morning and a 55% increase at night. This had city planners asking, what the fuck? Induced demand. If you provide more of something, or provide it for a cheaper price, people are more likely to use it, especially something like travel. The more routes you provide, the cheaper the cost of travel is for people. So instead of traffic distributing itself evenly around the new lanes or routes, more people tend to want to travel. Road engineer J.J. Leeming described it as such. Motorways and bypasses generate traffic, that is, produce extra traffic, partly by inducing people to travel who would have not otherwise have done so by making the new route more convenient than the old, partly by people who go out of their direct route to enjoy the greater convenience of a new road, and partly by people who use the town's bypass because they are more convenient for shopping and visits when through traffic has been removed. This was first noted in the 1930s by curious railway executives, but heavily influenced famous city planner Robert Moses. Moses was in charge of the opening of the Triborough Bridge, which was initially built in Manhattan to ease throughput on the Queensboro and Bronx Whitestone bridges. It was incredibly ineffective at this task. Within just a few years, all three bridges had now become completely filled with traffic. Moses would run into the same problem on Long Island, but he did not heed, instead continued to build the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which failed its goal to alleviate the Queens Midtown Tunnel, and all three of the East River bridges failed at this task too. But nobody seemed to learn despite warnings. Jumping forward to the Southern California Association of Governments, in 1989, an expansionary survey found that adding lanes or adding double-decker freeways wouldn't actually solve anything. It would merely give the cosmetic illusion. For every 10% increase in road space, an instant 4% demand would be generated. The remaining 6% would be filled within the coming years as more people began to use these spaces. This rendered these massive multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects completely useless within just a few years. Trying to cure traffic congestion by adding more capacity is like trying to cure obesity by loosening your belt. After the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, the Embarcadero Freeway was slated for demolition, as it was deemed too expensive to repair. They decided not to rebuild, and this raised some concern that the surrounding streets would become overloaded, but this never happened. Similarly, in New York City, planners feared that demolishing the decaying elevated portions of the West Side Highway would flood the surrounding area with commuters. However, they found that the 93% of traffic that would have become displaced wasn't, as to say, it simply disappeared. So how do you solve these problems? There's a few that have been proposed and some enacted. The opposite of induced demand is reduced demand. By shrinking the size of the road or simply changing the surroundings, you can reduce accident rates by up to 43%. This extra space can be yielded to pedestrians, bike lanes, trams, bus lanes, or new train stations. This changes commuter behavior, as those who need to get somewhere will get there anyway, and those who would be going on, say, a shopping trip, they would either choose a more optimal time or simply wouldn't go, alleviating traffic for commuters. Congestion pricing is a controversial, yet arguably the most effective method for reducing traffic. Proving to be very effective in Singapore, Stockholm, and London, it reduces travel times, improves air quality, and bolsters the pockets of the transportation system, allowing the money made off congestion pricing to go directly into the expansion of public transportation. A prime example is London. London reported a 30% decrease in congestion and a 30% increase in speed to destination. This money in turn went to support the growing bus network, increasing ridership by 38%. It is estimated that about 50% of the people shifted their commute to public transport, 25% choosing to avoid the area during congestion pricing, and the remaining 25% biking, walking, or carpooling. Another way is toll roads, although their effectiveness is disputed. The key is to set a price between adding to the induced demand problem and becoming a so-called Lexus lane, in which only wealthy commuters can afford to pay the toll pricing. Something called a hot lane, or high-occupancy toll lane, can be used, and these are used in Los Angeles, Jacksonville, and Miami. Very similar to a toll lane, those carpooling proceed free of charge into the express lanes, or those singular commuters can opt to pay a toll to access them. However, even in Miami, the hot lanes close as they fill up with commuters, in which not enough of the earned money was reinvested into public transport or alternative options. Similar critiques can be made of things like fuel taxes, something that recently sparked the Yellow Vest movement in France. There's no clear-cut answer to give, and there are many ways to tackle these issues, and each one has its own challenges and advantages. Expansion of roads, however, is clearly not the answer. Most studies of the impact of capacity expansion on development in metropolitan regions find no net increase in employment or other economic activity.